Much like another game I covered, this game too has a completely plausible infection yielding violent infected that want to bite you all over your face. In the city of Harran, aliens came down thousands or perhaps millions of years ago and dropped an altered form of rabies on humanity in an effort to enslave the human population. These reptiles, who were confirmed Illuminati, chose now of all the times and places to put humanity on the back burner. Sounds pretty crazy, right? Well, that's because it's absolute nonsense. For all those who don't know, this is actually an Easter egg by an absolute mad lad in the game. So let's actually get to the real reason of what happened to get an idea of what virus is currently running rampant and decimating the human population. First, let's discuss what causes these mutated infected walking around snacking on manwitches. A virus was released by the military, but it is not known if it was entirely on purpose or if it was an accident. At any rate, the virus is actually a mutated form of rabies. Now, seeing as I have a microbiology background and actually work with organisms currently, I'd like to consider myself at least somewhat knowledgeable concerning how diseases operate, but let's discuss the effects of rabies, which might make you a little concerned because it will actually make the Harran virus seem more terrifying as it falls in line with how the infection actually works in our universe. Rabies is an aggressive virus in its natural form. Upon entering an animal, the virus begins making its way up through the body, eventually leading to the creature's game end. That being said, let's focus on the effects it has on humans. Let's say you're a huge fan of raccoons for some reason. You go to pet one that you found on your front porch and it chomps down on your arm. Unfortunately for you, this particular animal was infected with rabies. It probably should have let you know because it didn't run away from you immediately, but you decide to touch it. But the teeth pierce deep into the muscles of your arm where the saliva is left behind laced with the rabies virus. The rabies virus typically does not travel via bloodstream, but instead prefers to begin making its way up through your nervous system, wreaking havoc along the way. The incubation time of rabies at this point can take about a few weeks to a couple months to be felt, but once symptoms begin to show, it is essentially game over for you. The main thing that people think of when they are told about rabies is aggression and salivation. But how does it happen? The first symptoms to show up are headaches, flu-like symptoms, and a general malaise. As the disease progresses, it will eventually enter your nervous system. Once this happens, the symptoms really start ramping up. The virus begins entering the neurons and using them as replicating factories. They attach to the cells, inject their RNA, your cell reads this, and then pumps out more viruses. As this process continues, your brain begins to swell. So fun fact, if you want to know the medical term for that, it is encephalitis. Anyways, with your brain swelling, there's essentially two paths now that the rabies can take: dumb rabies and furious rabies. Dumb rabies basically causes the person to become paralyzed and slip into a coma. The nervous tissue is destroyed, causing these issues to arise. After this, they will typically expire. Furious rabies is the kind we all typically think of when we see the movie Cujo. With the brain swelling, this will cause the motor control to start going out the window. However, this is also going to induce tremendous aggression in the host as well. Parts of the brain will become damaged as the brain swells, and other involuntary motor functions will begin to start failing, like swallowing, for instance. Due to this happening, this can also yield something called hydrophobia, which is the fear of water. After these symptoms appear, the person usually has about 2 to 10 days until their expiration. Now, one of the interesting aspects of rabies witnessed in game is the generalized fear of water certain infected have. While not all, some will avoid the water at all costs and even break off a chase if you were to dive in. Another thing to note about the rabies virus is that the sun destroys it. Should the virus be exposed to the outside world even for a few seconds, this can kill the virus due to UV radiation. So you're starting to see where the infected kind of get their notes from. But let's move on to the Harran virus now, since we have done a quick introduction into the effects of the rabies virus. The Harran virus, as we all know indicated in the game, is presumably a mutated form of rabies. If I had to take a crack at it, however, I would throw in the hypothesis that due to the infection time and how short the incubation period is, this is a new form of virus that has completely shirked its original crawl up the nervous system to a much quicker route by taking the superhighway known as the bloodstream. When a person is bitten, they turn in a few hours to a few days, unlike the original form of rabies, which takes a few weeks to a couple months. Because of this, infection rates exploded as the people began to succumb to this disease at an accelerated rate, rather than having an effective response by any local government to curtail this outbreak. Making its way through the bloodstream, the small virus would be able to get past the blood-brain barrier and into the neurons of a person much quicker. Here, it would be able to set up shop just like rabies does, but I would also say that it is more infectious due to how quickly it overtakes a person after the initial bite. Soon after being bitten, a person would suffer seizures causing fatigue and blurred vision, and in some cases, unconsciousness. But there is good news. The Harran virus, despite how lethal and unpredictable it is during the outbreak, does have one weakness: antizin. Antizin is a viral suppressant which which temporarily stops the Harran virus's progression and relieves symptoms. It is, however, not a cure. When infected, an individual will start having seizures, and if antizin is not administered quickly, the individual will begin to transform into an extremely aggressive viral, with 30% exhibiting human speech for a short period of time before returning back to their natural state of aggression. After a period of time, they will deteriorate into biters, and biters are mindless animals attacking and biting anyone not already turned. Would you like to know how antizin actually works? Of course you would. Currently, we actually have a similar medicine to it. It's called prophylaxis. Essentially, this medicine is able to reduce the spread of HIV in about 60% of cases by impeding an extremely crucial mechanism in the cell from reading the RNA from the virus. What is this mechanism? It is called reverse transcriptase. When a virus latches onto your cell and injects its RNA, your cell finds the RNA and it's like, oh cool, a message from the DNA on a protein I'm supposed to be aiding in building. It will read it using reverse transcriptase. After it is read, your cell will use this translation to build a protein, thus building an HIV virus. So while not implicitly stated, I hypothesize that this is how antizin actually works. When exposed to the virus, taking this medicine will block the virus from replicating inside your body. But again, this is only a temporary fix, as eventually your cells will return to normal operating status and begin building the virus once more should another dose of antizin not be administered or even available. So how exactly are the infected so good at transferring a virus to non-infected? Much like rabies, the Harran virus would move down into the salivary glands after the viral load in the brain was extremely high. At this point, it would be replicating once more and would cause these salivary glands to begin producing an overflow of spit. When coming into contact with humans, the infected is naturally aggressive and would bite a person. From here, the same path is taken as rabies. Saliva is implanted into the muscle as well as the virus. At this point, post-bite, the process begins all over again. During the day, the infected are fairly aggressive but much more sluggish. This is an expected result as the UV virus outright kills the rabies virus, and as such, the Harran virus too. Obviously, the virus is inside of your meat suit or inside the meat suit of a person, but it is still possible that the virus causes an aversion to sunlight even when the person is capable of being out during the day. These infected are usually your run-of-the-mill and are easily game-ended. There are more highly mutated versions of infected, which will be discussed in future videos, but this would suggest that one of two things, or maybe even a combination of both, are happening. The first route is perhaps the virus affects people differently. Based on the genome or immunological response to the virus's presence, this may yield different variants of infected. Perhaps a stronger response by the body, which leads to more brain damage, actually yields weaker infected as the body is already run down and depleted. Because of this response, we see people that have a normal functioning immune system, and as such has yielded your typical infected running amok. Those with weaker immune systems end up ironically becoming the stronger versions of the infected, as their bodies did not mount such an effective response. This in turn allowed the virus to flourish without too much interference, which induced many mutations in the host. The second possibility is that the virus itself mutates. As we all know, life and even viruses adapt. It could be that the first wave of infections are simply the standard infected that we see all over the place. Bite after bite, transformation after transformation, changes how the virus interacts with the cells. After being built by human cells, it would become even more familiar with the human genome. Due to this, it may become quite successful in mutating and thus inducing further changes in the host, causing these changes down the line. So basically, you're bit by a normal zombie, and then you go out, and then you bite another person, and then they go out and bite another person, and let's say like 10 generations down the line, you end up with a volatile. Speaking of which, when we get to night, the mutations become much more alarming. It's clear that the virus at this point has fully infected the host, yielding to creatures who have perfectly functioning motor cortexes as well as cerebellums. The aggression has been cranked up to astronomical levels, and they do not appear to really be all that human anymore. At this point, any person caught out at night will be torn apart by these animals. Their bodies react strongly to UV light, sending them running in the opposite direction, as it does quite a bit of damage to them. Ultimately, these creatures appear to have had the most mutagenic of viruses, and essentially the perfect conditions to lead them to this. But like I said, also expect a video on them as well in the future. Not only are there more aggressive creatures running around at night, but the regular infected also appear to become more aggressive. Without the oppressive UV light coming from the sun, perhaps the virus operates at an increased capacity, which in turn causes the human host to react with greater aggression as well. This would indicate to me that the virus doesn't completely destroy the brain like the rabies virus does, but instead influences how the brain functions. Considering it is purposely created as a bioagent, this would not be surprising at all. In your standard infected, there your flight or fight seems to constantly be activating, suggesting that the virus does play a role on the other organs located in the body. Whether or not this is intentional is unknown, but based upon the interaction with the brain, many hormones would be flooding the body and could easily be triggering this. With all these highly infected running around, you must use parkour skills to navigate the city and outrun the infected. Fairly easy with the slow-moving creatures, but your equal is a volatile who will keep pace with you every step of the way. With the infected characteristics briefly touched on, as well as disease, origins, and a little bit of gameplay setup, let's discuss what you're even doing here. In Dying Light, you are Kyle Crane, hired by the Global Relief Effort, or the GRE, to retrieve sensitive stolen files. You enter the quarantine city and are almost immediately infected. Luckily, you are administered antizin before the virus progresses too far, but again, it is only a temporary fix. You progress through the story, fighting many different versions of infected who are highly aggressive, as mentioned previously. This aggression seems to actually stem from damage to the cerebrum, as well as an almost control on the mind, so basically mutated rabies. So there you have it, a quick rundown on Dying Light, so now you know it's basically coming to this channel very soon, which I am pretty pumped about seeing as there are so many different variants to choose from. Typical YouTuber statement number 32, if you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe. If you are new and you want to keep up with the channel, hit that stupid bell to actually be notified once in a while, I guess. I can't wait to tell you in about a year the 5-step process just to subscribe, so that's going to be complete nonsense. Anyways, enough of the salt. I will drop my Twitter, Patreon, and Discord, as well as my merch links in the description if anyone is interested in any of that. And of course, I'd like to thank my patrons. Our 3 astronauts are Joseph Givens, thank you sir. Next up, It's Not a Spoon, I appreciate your support bro. And then we got the old man known as Laffy No Skill, thank you as well. Our 2 scientists are A. Laurentis, and then we got Artyom Chornage. Thank you guys for your patronage, it is appreciated. Our lone resident is Punished Meat. The 3 geneticists are Allison Caspero, Andrew Lawson, and Divine Whisper. Holding down their masters of biology, we have Adam Hartswick, Cameron Smith, Cough Syrup, Edgy McGee, Mr. Poyfish, Stutz, The Rin of Lies, and the Otterman. And last but not least, with their bachelors of morphological sciences, we have Add to the List, Akigao Comics, Anthony Charles West, Anthony Wolf, Captain Gasmask, Dark Gear, Dragon of Death, Dustin Ellis, Eric Scott Gillies, Fruit Eater, Icarus, Jake Russell, Kyle McHenry, Marcus Vall, Professor Bennett, Russell McBride, Sir Deadlock, and Trixie Lulu Moon. Thank you guys for your patronage. Alright, so I know this episode was a little shorter than I have been doing lately, but it's just an intro after all for, those who haven't played the game. And with Dying Light 2 on the horizon, now's as good as any time to get hyped. Anyhow, thank you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.